The calmness of the night was a stark contrast to the storm brewing within my home. As a cybersecurity major, I was proud of myself on my understanding of the digital world, a realm I believed I had mastered, but nothing in my studies had prepared me for the terror that was to unfold. It began with an innocuous enough event, a flicker of movement barely perceptible. I dismissed it as a trick of the light or a figment of my overworked imagination. "You're seeing things, Megan. Time for a break." But the illusion of safety was shattered the moment I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a camera shutter clicking from somewhere within the depths of my house. My heart stopped, my blood ran cold, and the chilling realization hit me. I was not alone. Frantically, I scanned my surroundings, every shadow, every corner, but found nothing. The silence that followed was oppressive, suffocating. Then my phone buzzed. A message, anonymous, with nothing but a link was sitting in notifications. I clicked it and my blood turned to ice. It linked to a live stream, revealing a view of my own living room from an angle I hadn't placed a camera. And there he was, a figure cloaked in darkness, his face obscured, but his intentions clear, standing in my bedroom upstairs. "Welcome to your nightmare, Megan." His voice was a twisted melody, a harbinger of the horrors to come. I stared frozen as he began to move through my room with a disturbing familiarity, each step a declaration of his control. I grabbed onto a kitchen knife, but he had seen it on the live stream, just like I could witness my own house from the view of 18 cameras. Who was he? How did he get inside? How did he place those cameras? And what was he planning to do? When I looked back at the phone, he had disappeared from my room, which meant that he could be anywhere in my house. The game had begun. His rules, his playground. My home had become a hunting ground. He taunted me, leaving me to discover twisted tokens of his presence. A bloodied knife here, a lock of hair there. His actions were calculated, designed not just to scare, but to mentally unravel me. "You can't hide, Megan. I'm everywhere. You're playing by my rules now. Who are you? Why are you doing this? Leave my house right now, or I will call the police. You have a phone in your palms, Megan. Place the call, but remember, if you close your phone or switch to any other app, your phone will explode in your hand." His words echoed in my mind, a psychological warfare meant to break me. But amidst the terror, a spark of awe ignited within me. I couldn't outmuscle him, but maybe, just maybe, I could outsmart him. I remembered my studies, my projects on cybersecurity and hacking. If I could get to my equipment, if I could just access the network. "What do you want from me?" I cried, or at least fake cried. I had to appear as weak as possible to him to come up with my contingency plan. I made my way to the basement while weeping. It housed my makeshift lab, filled with servers and monitors. It was a fortress of technology, and within its walls, I found my courage. If I could get to the server room, I could make contact with authorities outside. As I finally entered the server room, locking the door behind me, I faced the screens, my fingers poised above the keyboard. This was it, the battlefield I knew, where I held the advantage. I went to work straight away. I began to weave my counterattack, a silent plea for help embedded within the code. The night was far from over, but for the first time since the nightmare began, I dared to hope. The stage was set, the players positioned. The game, however, was about to change. As I sat in the dimly lit server room, my hands moved with a purpose, driven by fear and an unwavering resolve to end this nightmare. The psycho believed he was the puppeteer, but in the digital world, I was in my element. My plan was simple, yet risky. Hack into the cameras he'd so confidently installed and send out a distress signal. The task, it was daunting. My fingers danced across the keyboard, commands flowing with an urgency fueled by adrenaline. I tapped into the live stream, injecting a hidden message into the metadata. A digital source aimed at anyone savvy enough to notice. Time was a luxury I didn't have. With each passing moment, his patience would wear thin and he'd come looking for me. I had to act fast. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps approaching, slow and deliberate. He was near. "You can't hide in there forever, Megan. Come out and play." His taunts echoed through the door, each word a twisted invitation to a dance of death. But I focused on my screen, my heart pounding in my chest as I worked to reroute the signal to make my invisible cry for help visible to the outside world. And then, success. The message was out, beacon cutting through the digital noise. But there was no time to celebrate, no time to wait for rescue. I had to survive until help arrived. Prepared myself for his inevitable entry, setting up a makeshift barricade. The room was secure, but I knew it wouldn't hold him for long. I needed a weapon, something to defend myself with. My eyes scanned the room, landing on a smoldering iron. It was no gun, but it would have to do. "This ends tonight." The door began to shake, his attempts to break through growing more violent. I stood ready, the hot iron in hand, my entire body tensed for the confrontation. Suddenly, the door gave way, and he stormed in, his figure a mass of rage and frustration. But the element of surprise was mine. As he advanced, I swung with all my might, the smoldering iron connecting with his flesh, eliciting a howl of pain. "You little bitch," but I didn't stop to hear his curses. Pushed past him, running out into the night, screaming for help. Behind me, the psycho was in pursuit, his own screams a mixture of rage and agony. The chase was short-lived, lights flashed in the distance, sirens cutting through the silence of the night. The police, guided by my digital SOS, finally arrived. As they took him down, I collapsed, the adrenaline fading, leaving me shaking and exhausted. The officers rushed to my side, their voices a comforting blur as I tried to process the reality that I was safe, that it was over. "You're safe. If you don't mind, can I ask you a few questions?" As I recounted the night's events, the realization of what I'd survived, what I'd accomplished began to sink in. I'd faced my deepest fears, fought back against the darkness, and emerged victorious, not just as a survivor, but as a warrior of the digital age. The psycho was taken away, his reign of terror ended by a combination of my will to survive and the very technology he'd used to terrorize me. As the dawn broke, casting light on the chaos of the night, I knew I'd never be the same. I'd been tested, pushed to my limits, and in the crucible of fear, I had found a strength I never knew I possessed. The night of terror was over, but the memory of it, of the power within me, would stay forever. In the digital shadows, I had found my light, my resolve, and my defiance. It's been 20 years, yet the memory of this incident feels so fresh. I was 8 years old back then. I lived with my dad as my parents were going through a divorce. My dad worked as a nurse at the local hospital, so he had to pull a lot of night shifts often. Whenever he had night shifts, I went to spend the night with my grandma, who lived 2 blocks away from our house. But the night when this incident happened, my grandma was out of town. It was a Saturday night, and my dad and I were all set to go out to dinner when his phone rang. After talking for a brief moment, my dad told me he has to rush to the hospital, as it's an emergency, but he'll be back in an hour. He asked me if I would be okay to stay on my own for a while, which I gladly accepted. Being an 8-year-old, having the house to yourself felt quite thrilling. He got into his car, and he told me to lock the doors and watch TV until he comes back. I watched him drive away, and then locked the door. It was my first time being home alone, so I felt like a king. I could do whatever I want now, and there's no one to scold me. I drank a lot of juice, ate 3 scoops of ice cream, 2 big chocolate muffins, without having to ask for permission. I then ran into my dad's office, which always fascinated me. I sat on his big armchair, and started to go through the stuff lying on his table. He had a fountain pen that often grabbed my attention. I started writing with it on his fresh white memo pads. After jeopardizing a few pages of the memo pad, I rolled them into a paper ball and aimed for the basket in the corner. 15 minutes went by doing all these stupid things when I remembered about the clown head. The patient of my dad gave him a big rubber clown head before passing away in a terrible accident. My dad couldn't say no to the man, so he brought it home, but he kept it in the garage, and no matter how many times I asked for it, he never let me play with that. I've always been a weird kid who was never terrified of clowns. Instead, I like them. I love their goofy appearance. I came out of his office and walked to the garage. The house was so quiet that I could hear my every footstep creaking on the wooden floor. I entered the garage and turned on the lights. The clown head was about a foot tall, with no holes for eyes or nostrils. The clown face was drawn on. It can be creepy to some people, but not to me. As I already said, I had a fascination for clowns. I picked up the clown head, and suddenly, a stroke of cold wind brushed through my left shoulder. Holding the clown head, I turned back and saw nothing in that empty garage. The eyes of the clown were blue and his smile was too big to describe. As I held the clown head in my hands, a weird sensation took over my body. I began to hear a voice in my head. The voice was hush yet shrill. "Put it on." "What? Is anyone here? Just put it on." Before I could realize, was talking to myself. My hands lifted my head and made me wear it. I can't explain the feeling when my head entered the clown head, but I still feel something hypnotized me. Something made me wear it, using my own hands. I stood like a statue for a moment. The clown head was weird from the inside. The smell of rubber, mixed with paint, lingered inside the air of the clown head. As I snapped out of my state of trance, I realized I didn't want to play with it anymore, hence decided to take it off. And that's when the nightmare began. I casually pulled the clown head, but it didn't come out. Thinking it might have got stuck, I grabbed the top of the head with both my hands and pulled it again, but the head didn't move an inch. Drops of sweat appeared on my forehead as I realized the air inside the head had started to warm up, and there was no hole for ventilation in it. I couldn't see or hear anything, and my breathing got heavy. Okay, it'll come off. I just have to pull harder. I told myself to keep calm and not panic. I started pulling the head, but it wasn't coming off. I tried to slip my finger in to create a gap, but it was stuck around my neck too tightly. What the hell? I tried harder for a few more seconds, and finally started to panic. The air inside the head was getting hotter with me panicking, and I started choking and gasping inside it. It was so damn easy to put on, but it feels completely impossible to take off. Tears rolled down my cheek in fear. I screamed, "Dad, help me," but then remembered I am the only one in this house. Couldn't make my way outside the garage, and it also didn't feel safe to walk with this head on. I feared if I stumble down, then I'll get more injured. Slowly I started to suffocate. Grabbed it, pulled it, hit it with my small hands, but nothing helped. I screamed and felt even more terrified, hearing them cough inside the clown head. There's no way my neighbors can hear me, which means if I don't take it out myself, I'll die. My ears turned red, and I could feel my entire face burning. The situation was so claustrophobic that I peed my pants. I was suffering and crying. I prayed to God to get me out of this, and I will never look at it again. My paranoia reached such a level that I felt pressure in my neck and vomited at once. The juice, muffins, ice cream all came out from my mouth in the worst form possible and started to float inside the clown head, which was also running out of breathable air. The toxic smell of my vomit mixed with the rubbery smell of the clown head made me realize death is not far away. As I moved left to right in panic, the vomit moved around my nose and ear, which resulted in me vomiting more and more. I couldn't stop myself, even if I wanted to. Now I was choking in my vomit under the worst circumstances possible. My nostrils got blocked by the disgusting fluid, and my ears felt numb. A shrill beep was going in my head that started to blur my vision. I understood if I don't do something quickly, I'm not going to survive. Pulled and pulled, but the head was getting tighter around my neck. Was trying hard, but suddenly my hand slipped and I fell on the shelves at the garage wall, trying to regain my balance. I fell on the floor at my back, and the vomited fluid went behind my head and let my nose finally pop out. I was searching for something when my hand picked up a metal tool that had fallen from the shelf. It was a spanner. I placed the pointy arc between my jaw and the clown head and started to put pressure on the head to come out. The spanner created a small gap, and the gooey fluid started to drip from the gap. Kept still until most of the fluid flowed away, and some amount of air flowed in, giving me a chance to fight back. Once I regained my sanity, I grabbed the spanner real tight and said to myself that in the count of 3, I'll put all my pressure so that the spanner pulls out the clown head. 1, 2, 3. As I did what I planned, a cracking sound took place with horrifying pain that made me scream. The clown head tore from that one corner due to the pressure, but my jaw broke as well. Smeared in blood, vomit, and sweat, when I finally took the clown head off, I heard footsteps coming at me while screaming my name. Andrew, Andrew. Oh my God, Andrew. I woke up in the hospital 2 days later. Doctors had to clip my left jaw back, followed by 7 hours of surgery. There was nothing to do, no one to blame, as it was an accident that happened to a stupid kid who did a stupid thing while being home alone. Luckily, my broken jaw got better with time, and I don't have difficulty talking or eating, as steel plates are attached inside my mouth to support my facial structure. The only thing that bothers me is my scar. I have this huge scar on my left cheek. It forms into a disturbing smile whenever I stretch my lips. I have lost my face forever. Now there's an invisible clown head resting on me for the rest of my life. It was a cold August morning. It was a typical Thursday workday that for anyone would go unnoticed. But in Mike's case, it was a special day. The young man had just broken off a relationship of more than 10 years and was just recovering from that experience. He was advised to go out, meet new people, or enjoy the nightlife, but he had another plan in mind. The young man had asked for 2 days off from work and talked to his uncle to borrow his house in the mountains, a spiritual retreat where he has no signal, no internet, and his cell phone would remain off. There are no neighbors around to bother him, and his ex would not be able to contact him either. Before he left, his ex-girlfriend's van was waiting for him outside. "Are you sure about this?" "Of course, Amanda. I know it's something that'll do me good. Having a wingman hiding in the mountains is not my idea of something that can do any good. It makes sense, but it'll work for me. Don't come crying to my house if you're being chased by a yeti. Your uncle is capable of hiding them in the closet. With any luck, I won't even meet my own shadow. It's just a few days, and I'll see you and talk things over, okay?" Okay. Mike traveled for more than 5 hours, and when he arrived, everything was as he expected. Despite being small, the house was nicely decorated, and the furniture was kept in perfect condition. To his disappointment, the phone still had a signal, and he immediately received a call from his uncle as soon as he arrived. "Hey, Uncle. Good morning, Mike. Are you home yet? Just got here, and I was able to get in. Do you have cameras? You just called me as I walked in." That would be a very good investment, but unfortunately not. Tell me, why don't I hear your friends? You went with them, didn't you? Yeah, well, we're all here. I had to move away so they wouldn't start making jokes while I was talking. Oh well, great. Take care of the house and remember to call me if you have any problems. Great, thanks a lot. The young man remembered how he had to lie to his uncle, saying that he wouldn't enter the house unless he went with his friends. His uncle was one of those conspiranoid people, and went on and on about how he didn't want to go into that house for fear of finding aliens, so Mike usually ignored him. With a small, complicit chuckle, he thought of how little use the house would have been if he had to share it with someone else. After a full day of relaxation and tranquility, Mike went to sleep with immeasurable peace, but it didn't last long. A strange noise made him open his eyes. The room was dark, and the moonlight was barely coming through the window. Mike thought it was probably raining, so he tried to relax again. Before he could fall asleep, a beam of light hit his eyes and alerted him. Opening them, he realized it was the moonlight shining directly against the window. Mike tried to continue sleeping, but paranoia overcame him, and he could not convince himself that it was all a dream. So the young man got dressed and slowly got out of bed. He looked out the window and saw no one. After returning to bed, the young man was about to cover himself, but an image froze him with fear. As he made his discovery, the blood in his body froze, and fear came over him so suddenly that every fiber of his body translated into pain. The window a few feet away was closed, but there was a dirt trail that started at the window and ended under his bed. The only thing Mike could think of was to take a big leap from the bed and start running. Maybe grab a knife and hide, or maybe drift away until daylight. But suddenly, he was falling and hitting his head against the wall. Whoever was under his bed lifted it to one side, causing Mike to fall. Immediately, something jumped out of the mess of sheets and rushed at Mike's body. By the time Mike could react and understand what was happening, a tall, white, gangly man stood above him with a knife in his hand. His blue eyes were wide open, staring with unwarranted anger into Mike's eyes. Despite being very skinny, this man had a lot of strength and knew some martial art, since his whole body was arranged in such a way that the young man could not move a muscle. "Please, don't kill me." I closed my eyes. I didn't get to see your face. Mike cried desperately with tears in his eyes, without moving a muscle. "Just take everything. I'm not going to move from here. Tie me up if you want, so you didn't see my face, and you promised not to move, kid. I swear, I'm not interested in justice. If you don't believe me, I don't have a landline here. Take my cell phone and my car." What a kind and cooperative boy. "Tell me, kid, where are the valuables? Move the dining room furniture. You'll see a hole. I have money stored in case." Without letting him finish his sentence, the psychopath began to cut Mike's forehead with his knife, tracing a horizontal line. "Sorry to interrupt you, kid, but you were boring me. I was telling you where you could find my money. You see, I have no intention of robbing you. The only reason I have to visit you is to see you bleeding. Why? Because I saw you while you were pumping gas on the way here, and to be honest, you have a face of a squealing pig, and I love it." With that said, the imposter slowly plunged the knife into Mike's hand, making sure to twist the knife into his skin. Meanwhile, Mike was still not opening his eyes. Fear had taken over his whole body, which remained motionless next to a person who had the intention of taking his life. He thought of his family, his friends, even his ex. Suddenly, the psychopath released the knife and began to beat the boy savagely, while he could only cry and beg for mercy. In a moment of clarity, Mike opened his eyes and noticed how the criminal had his eyes closed and pointed upwards, as if enjoying the moment. The boy used all his strength to push him down. Mike stood up and ran desperately, but he was bouncing around, trying not to fall. He had lost a lot of blood and received many blows, so he was very dizzy. At the moment, Mike felt he had the man behind him, about to catch him, but when he turned around, he was still on the ground, laughing, as if enjoying the show. Without grabbing his car, Mike just ran as far away from the house as he could, hoping to run into someone to help him. As he was escaping, he could hear the man's taunting cries from the cabin. "Run, little piggy, fly to your freedom. Don't stumble or you might hit your head, and who knows what the evil killer will do to you. I'll be waiting for you. When you want to come back, I'll always be at home." When he returned the next day with the police, no one was there. The criminal, a known patient from a nearby insane asylum, had even gone to the trouble of cleaning the house. Mike had no intention of staying or returning to it. From that day on, every time his uncle mentions an alien, he laughs generously and thinks that having an encounter with a human could be much worse.